Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 1, up to Chapter 56, page Kuf Aleph, 101. In the midst of the 14th Discourse, called Shoftim. And we're in the middle of the discussion on the difference between Ohr and Shefa, which can be translated as, I've been translating Ohr as energy or light, and Shefa as a flow. And flow, with the distinction being that one is a transmission, two types of transmission. One is a transmission of something of substance. When we say substance, everything is substance. Especially today, we know whether it has this type of, whether it's airwaves or sound waves, or it's actual physical transmission of electricity, or transmission of physical things like water, or charity, as he said, hashpah, tzedakah. They all go under the loose category called Shefa. But there's a distinction. Now, like we learned earlier, for example, that the light that was created the first day was able to, Adam was able to see from one end of the world to the next with that light. When you talk about light waves, sound waves, besides the fact that they reach one place, one earth, to the one side of the planet to the other, they also pierce walls. You can be in your own home and you can listen to the radio or turn on the internet or TV. So even though they are definitely they're waves and they're measurable and so on, but they're a whole different category. So as such, they have a very strong distinction from that to something that is a shefa that we can tangibly relate to. So though the Rebbe Rashbi does use the words blima, or the expression that he actually used when he spoke about shefa and Ohr, he said the words were shefa shamakam the shefa merde hashpah ezemuhuz davar. Ezemuhuz davar. Clearly, he's referring. When he means that it's a broad term, and can be used even when you're talking about anything. That's why he said that the Kabbalim, the Kabbalists used the word Ohr, where the Chakram used the word Shefa. So clearly they were referring to similar ideas. But when you break it down, as I just said, even though technically everything is a transmission, and everything can be under the category of Shefa, but there's a big distinction between a transmission that's in a type of Ohr and there's one that's a type of Shefa, meaning one that has that type of substance that can be measured, can be passed on, and remains, as he said, and remains with the recipient. And the second thing is that it also affects the transmitter and the recipient. There's an impact that it has. So the key distinction to establish the difference between Shefa and Ohr, as we've been talking about it, are these factors. So when you want to apply that now to the examples, let's say airwaves. Okay, you have the airwaves are allowed to have, let's say, cellular phones. So clearly, there's definitely there are waves that allow sound to be heard, and they allow sound and vision to be seen. So you could ask the question: is that something that is connected to its source or not? So the question is really you have to apply the example and see whether it fits or doesn't fit. The examples he's been using here in Ayin Beis for Ohr, that is sunlight and any other form of light that has a source that emits that light and energy. And the second one, the example that he used in the last chapter, 55, was Ohr v'chayes hanefesh, the light and energy and the life force of the soul. So there, that fits very well into the category of Ohr. Other forms of transmission, you simply have to determine which type of transmission is it. I would think that electricity, for example, or light waves and sound waves also have a source. And you stop that source, you could basically block these type of waves. If, for example, you stop the beaming and transmission of any type of electricity, and you can have the electricity gets cut off, it stops flowing. Yes, does it have an impact on the place where it reaches? Yes, but so does solar energy. Solar energy is sunlight. You take away the sun, there's no longer energy. Can you bottle that energy? You can bottle the impact of that energy. That energy could heat water, for example. Countries that use solar energy. you can channel the energy in all kinds of interesting ways. But we're talking about the light itself is no longer there at that point. When you talk about, for example, the hashpah of seichel, intelligence, there, even if the teacher is gone, as he said, and the flow has stopped, the ideas remain, and they forever and ever with the recipient. And the second aspect, that it also changes and affects the source. So in a case like sunlight, even though its impact has impact and so on, but it doesn't affect does the source have to immerse itself? Does it have to work? Does it have to, like you call it, tirde, hislapshus, hisaskus, the different words of applying yourself, of committing, of investing, of involvement? The answer is no. Whereas a shefa, in the pure sense of a shefa, there is that element. There is an effort, and therefore there's also, in other words, there's basically the three things. There's substance being transmitted, therefore there's an effort, because it's not just flowing directly, automatically out of the source, and as a result of effort, there's an impact, for good or for bad, on everyone involved, on the transmitter and on the recipient. Now, if you say, for example, sun also has an impact on the recipient, yes, it has an impact, it warms us, and without it we wouldn't be alive. But that's not what we're talking about, that there are incidental impact on us. The question is whether there's an impact on the light itself or on the source when it transmits that light. And that's the answer. The light and the source are not affected by the impact, whereas, let's say, a teacher is affected by students. Are there students there? Are there students not there? So as explained in this past chapter, like the sun, if there's cloudy day, overcast day, makes no difference. If students are clouded, so to speak, and are blocked, and it makes absolute difference to the teacher. So that was example number one, is the sunlight that were discussed in the last chapter. And example number two is er v'chayes hanefesh. So though, as he said in the parentheses, fundamentally soul energy inside of a body is a pnimi, but it functions like an Ohr. Meaning, in other words, the Ohr here, the whole example of light and energy is going to be for seviv, for makif, not pnimi. But as far as this element of Ohr, where there's no effort on the part of there's no substance in the sense that the energy just flows automatically and there's no effort, and so on. There, the Ohr v'chayes hanefesh is an example for Ohr and not shefa. And the fact, as he said, that the body has to be prepared, that's a general preparation. It has to be a human body, not another body. And the fact that the soul has to go through a tzimtzum to enter into a body, that again is simply the process, just like a sun has a nartik, has a shell, a shield, same too. So that's just how it transmits. It needs to be diminished. But the bottom line is, it still retains its property of energy. That is not that is and light. That is not like shefa in all the different differences that we've discussed. Okay. So when you talk about the faculties, for example, like he said, when your mind is more refined due to not having eaten a meal or other factors that refine the brain, that itself has a direct impact on how the energy flows. When it comes to a body, it doesn't make a difference if it's a guf gas or a guf av, or a guf gas or a guf tak, meaning a subtle, a refined body or a coarse one. Just like there's no difference in the life force between the head to the toe. So that's the two examples he's used in chapter 55. To contrast that with what he discussed in chapter 54 and 53, what shefa is. So basically, the second half of 53 and 54 were dedicated to shefa, with examples of, just to sum it up, there's the physical example. Tzedakah was the first example, water. Then he moved to the keiches and nefesh faculties, the power to throw, the more refined power to draw, or something that has a skill and a craft. Then the relationship with seichel, how seichel manifests in each of those and applies itself. Of course, the hashpah of a teacher to a student, that's also a classic example for shefa. And then in chapter 53, with the examples for Ohr, we have right now so far two examples: sunlight and the light and energy of the soul. I mean, breakdown of sunlight is also obviously moonlight and the light of a flame, all of them. Another example I should add, he added, was the one with a flame a fire that heats and warms metal. So that too is a function of an Ohr. So these are several examples. The two big examples are the sunlight and the chayes hanefesh, and the soul, but there's also the other specific ones, specifically the matris and the so on, and the metal that is placed into a fire, which again works like an Ohr, not like a Shefa. That's the distinctions, and that sums up basically the last few chapters. Now he continues in chapter 56. He's going to go into obviously qualifying some things, and we're going to talk about some questions about these examples. Obviously, all of this is to come illuminate and teach us what Ohr is, which is really coming to explain what transcendent energy is, which its function is not a function. It's all it is Gili Mina Etzem. Reveals, it's a revelation or expression of the essence, as opposed to Mamala Kalam and Ohr Pnimi, which its function is Lahoyer Es Elemas. Its purpose and function is to illuminate the worlds, and therefore to be internalized within them. Ohr and Shefa are examples for this, but to get that clearly, the examples are still being developed here. And I want to add a few other things that I didn't mention. I should mention before we continue, and that is also a key point in the last chapter was the difference between when you say something is kamoy ha'etzem mamish or lefi eifan ha'etzem. So he spoke about that. Even Shefa also is obviously seichel, and it's coming from a bar seichel. So a chacham, a wise person, is giving off wisdom. So his transmission is a transmission of knowledge, as he is knowledgeable. But he explained that this is called eifan ha'etzem. It's not kamoy ha'etzem. The difference being, the example he gave was the example when a intelligent person, a scholar, speaks mundane matters. So there's wisdom in there, and there's things we learn from that. Sichus chulin. Whereas a simple person, you don't have that wisdom. But clearly, it's still called mundane matters, meaning that it's not kamoya etzem. It's lifi eifana etzem. So, being he's an intelligent person, so even his so-called mundane words and simple language also has wisdom in it. But no one's going to call sichus chulin like light that reflects a source. When it comes to energy, a light, Ohr is kamoya etzem mamish. Besides the fact, the effort that the teacher has to apply, even a wise person to teach. Just talking about this element, when we say Ohr is me'ina etzem, the mila of Ohr, meaning the advantage, the virtue of Ohr over Shefa, as he says me'ina Ohr, that is me'ina shemesh. So the key to understand that is that seichel doesn't work quite in that way. So it's kafi eifan etzem. It's not a contradiction to, and it's definitely according. What I said was that it's informed by the etzem. It's informed by the source. That transmission, just like the transmission of water. You transmit water, literally a physical thing. Obviously, you could say the water is similar to its source. Not only similar, it is the same thing. You're transmitting water, but in that case, actually, it's not a good example because there's no really etzem, and there's no essence, and there's no transmission of the essence. The water itself is actually being moved. But let's say when a wealthy person is giving money to a pauper, tzedakah, he used the example. So the tzedakah, because he's a wealthy person, he has money, so he's able to give it. You wouldn't say the money is you see lifi eifana etzem, not kamoya etzem. There too, again, is not really a good example because it's still money, and money is money. So that type of shefa, it doesn't really work well. In the faculties, it works very well because when a faculty manifests inside of a container, there it's already not the essence of the source of the transmission. It's a reflection of it. And yet, it's a reflection that is only commensurate with, so-called, as I said, informed by. And now we go to chapter Nun Vav, chapter 56. Now, in chapter 56, he's going to qualify some of the examples that we've been learning here. Ach, hanefesh mugder beguf. However, this example we just used about the soul, the spirit that gives life to a body, which has within the properties of Ohr, in all the aspects that he discussed. As we said. All the properties that we said in Ohr. Number one, that it does not take any effort on the part of the transmitter. Number 2, that it's me'ena etzem. It's like a reflection of. Number 3, that it radiates everywhere equally. So now he's going to qualify. Achanefesh hu mugde beguf. However, the soul is mugde beguf. When we talked about the sun, we said it's not contained by, or in any way confined by where it radiates or shines. The nefesh, however, is confined by the body in which it enters. Because when it gives life to this body, it cannot give life to another body. Recall, this makes it more similar to Shefa. Because we talked about a teacher, when he's involved in this effort of teaching one, he can be doing something else. So, for example, when we talked about a person's throwing a stone, and that power, your force, at that moment when you're using your strength to throw a stone, you can be doing something else. I'm not talking about with another faculty. With that faculty and that particular effort. So, when you talk about a soul, well, the soul is radiating inside the body. Yes, within that body, it radiates equally and gives and vitalizes, energizes every part of the body from head to toe equally. But it is confined to this body. Like it says in Zohar, Rashbi Shalom Eliyahu, Rashim Bayachai asked Eliyahu Navi, Lama lo yehoye ba'idra? Why didn't he come to the group, to the community, to the gathering when all the others gathered there, all the students gathered? The Heishav lo yehoye tzarich lahatzil es Rav Hamnuna Saba v'chaverov. And Eliyahu answered, because he had to, at that time, he had to save Rav Hamnuna Saba and his colleagues. They were in danger, and Eliyahu Navi went to save them. So, of course, there's a big question here. So it continues. It says in the commentary, Kel Barama is a commentary in the Zohar. And he's going to answer a question. Rashbi asked Eliyahu Navi why he wasn't there in the Idra. And he answered him, he went to save Rav Hamnuna Saba and his colleagues. The obvious question is, we find Eliyahu Navi coming to every bris. And there are many brises that happen simultaneously. So why couldn't it be in two places at once? So v'isa b'kel Rama, he says in Kel Rama, mishum de l'kfeidish la Rav Hamnuna Saba, for the honor. Rav Hamnuna Saba, hayitzarech li'slabish b'guf. He had to manifest inside of a body, Eliyahu Navi. It wasn't enough just his soul should come and his spirit to save him. For his honor, he had to manifest in a body. V'chein l'kfeidish la Rashbi. And the same thing with Rashbi. In honor of Rashbi wanted him to come to the Idra. Hayitzarech li'is b'guf. He had to be in the body. V'iyef shel nefesh achas li'is b'shnei gufim. And it's impossible for one soul to be in two separate bodies at the same time. He doesn't say at the same time actually, he says to be two separate bodies. But clearly he means at the same time, because you can have Gilgul and so on, reincarnation. And that which Eliyahu is found comes to every bris. It says in B'kei Rama Sham, that's just sparks alone. Sparks of his soul. But because of the honor of Hamnuna Saba, that's why Rashbi said, why couldn't you be here? He said, I had to be elsewhere, because it wasn't enough just to be with like a spark. So to be there, completely there.
That's less than a Seder? And a Seder is more than spark?
No, Seder is the same thing. Yeah. And, that's why it can be a many Seders. But it doesn't bring Seder, because by Seder is more of a custom. By a bris it says it's Svarim. By Seder, I don't think it says it's with the same authority as that Eliyahu comes to every bris. But anyway, he doesn't bring Seder, he brings a bris. I don't have to look that up. So what do we know from all this? So we see from this that the soul is contained by the body. And now he's going to explain this by distinguishing it from the sun. And this we understand, the contrast, the uniqueness in others, the contrast, this element of a soul's energy can be understood from the light and reflection of the sun. Because the sun is not confined or contained in any particular so-called body. Because from the mega tvur shemesh, the growth of the grain, the mega tvur shemesh, from the sun, it makes things grow. It makes things grow everywhere. Upoel b'kulam b'shava. So you see the sun's impact. Mega tvur shemesh is an expression used when the sun, basically the sun's energy is helping things grow. So you see that the sun, everywhere in the world, upoel b'kulam b'shava, affects everything everywhere equally. V'chein kama pulas ka'achas. At the same time, the sun also has many functions at once. So as opposed to the soul, which is confined, and when it's there, it can't be somewhere else, the sun does radiate everywhere. Now, obviously, a question can be asked. 1 minute. The sun is confined to this earth. It only radiates on this earth. It doesn't radiate, for example, on different planets. Yes, it does. Because the sun is the same sun, but different solar systems. You could ask the question, okay, the sun is a sun for this solar system. It's not a sun of another solar system.
It does radiate. See stars.
Okay, that may be the answer, that the sun, bottom line is, it's just that they're very distant, so they don't maybe benefit from the sun's direct warmth or light. But bottom line is, it's radiating. Only its impact is not seen everywhere. Good, that you can say that. Whereas the soul, when it's giving life to this body, it's not giving life to another body. Correct? Okay. So the sun is not confined in any particular way.
We learned that the soul gives life to the body equally any place in the body.
In the body, but not to another body.
But can you say that in the body that the soul gives more life, let's say, to the brain or heart?
He said exactly opposite.
I know, he said the opposite, and yes, I was here.
Right.
But it would seem like if using an analogy of for the planets or this and that, of the sun, you can say it's equally there, but it's weaker.
No, it's weaker brain power, but not weaker life force. No, the life force is equal everywhere, just like the sun in that sense. Here he's talking about being the confined element. Remember, there were different parts of the example. But let's continue on. Now he says another thing. He's analyzing these examples, obviously, to understand how it works with Ohr and Shefa. So now he goes like this. Ach HaShemesh, however, the sun, hu mukhrach ba'gili. The sun must radiate. The sun doesn't have a choice to shut itself down. V'zeh yuven me'er v'chayes hanefesh. Oh, I have to correct what I made a mistake how I read these lines. Correction, my friends. He's giving an example to understand the transcendent light and energy, right? That's not like Shefa. Shefa, this thing of substance, it considers and applies itself to the destination of where that transmission is going. That's very clear. A teacher, anything you need to recognize where you're giving it. And it impacts the transmitter and the recipient in a very direct way. Also, this transmitter is involved and makes an effort. Oh, I just said that. And finally, is confined by this effort. When he's involved in teaching, a good teacher is involved in this and not in something else. And he gave the two examples. An Ohr, on the other hand, is not substance. Ohr is just a reflection of what's coming from the source. It doesn't have to apply itself and consider the recipient. And it doesn't make any change in the transmitter. So one aspect in the soul doesn't work here in this example, and that's the confined. Where the soul works more like a teacher because it's confined to this body and not another. So he says, V'zeh yuvan. So this aspect, to understand the non-confined nature of transcendent light, that we understand from the sun and not from the soul. And then the soul, the example of the sun light has another flaw, and then we understand that flaw through the soul. In other words, the reason he gave two examples, what he's doing here is in chapter 56, he's explaining that the two examples, each one adds something that the other one doesn't have. The the sun adds the lack of confinement, the lack of being mugdar, as he puts it, the confined and committed to this particular area. Transcendent light doesn't have that. So where do you learn that? You can't learn that from the soul, because the soul is confined and committed to this body, not to another. So you learn that from the sun. On the other hand, the sun has a thing that doesn't work with transcendent light. The sun must radiate, and the light from God doesn't have to come. It's willed. And that, the sun example, doesn't work. So Hashemesh hu muchlich bagili. So what do we learn there? This element that it's doesn't must radiate. This yuvan we understand by erva chayes nefesh. Eina nefesh muchlich bagiluyim. The soul is not. This aspect we learn from the energy and life force of the soul, because the spirit is not muchlich bagiluyim. Doesn't have to be revealed. It has the power to conceal its faculties. As we learned earlier, and he's giving the same example. If you remember a few chapters back, we learned that rotzen, the will, desire, has the power to conceal faculties, whereas the faculties don't have that power. Seichel can only conceal part. And he gives the example from Avram Avinu. Kamei Avram Avinu olav Hashalom, shekovish rachnav mal bnei yechidei, mal ben yechidei. Like Avram Avinu, that kovish rachmav, he repressed. Obviously, the word is not repressed. The other suppressed. He suppressed his love for his only son. You have to say that he completely concealed that faculty, because if there was something left of it, he wouldn't be able to do it. He wouldn't be able to bring his son as an offering. So we see the soul has the power to conceal its faculty. Because he had not completely concealed that faculty, it was not possible that he would have done the asiyah, he would have done the offering properly. The soul also has the power, the ability, to completely conceal all its energy and revelation. Not just a faculty. This you could say, okay, the soul has the power not to conceal a faculty that comes from it. The soul has the power of love, and here it's suppressing that love. Now he's saying the whole energy of the soul can also be suppressed and concealed. Like in reincarnations, as God forbid. The nefesh adam begufa behema. God forbid, in a situation, Gulgulim, the reincarnation of the soul of a human being in the body of an animal. Because an animal, the animal does not live from the soul of the human being. Like we said before, souls fit into different types of bodies. So how is that working exactly? How could the soul of a human being be in the animal of a body, the body of an animal? It's because the soul, the animal can't do anything about this, the animal's body. So it's because the soul itself has the ability to conceal its light and its energy within itself.
These souls that are in
they're smart,
or they're screaming.
They're in prison. It's like a stroke victim.
They're where?
There's pain, yeah.
So you never know who you're dealing with.
Yeah, but sometimes the souls are trapped in human beings that are like animals, which is even worse. Your soul right now might be crying.
No.
They say, what kind of body did I go?
I'm conscious of that, though.
You're not, but your soul is.
No, so.
Do you ever cry for no apparent reason sometimes, like in the middle of the night?
Say it later.
Okay.
No,
Anyway, all this is just trying to point out how the soul has the element of choice here. V'sham, and there in Gilgulim, in the case of reincarnation, mitzad heder hakelim. The reason that the soul is concealed is because there's no containers. She'en gufa behema muchel lezeh. That means the body of the animal is not prepared for it. This is a very important qualification. I'll explain in a moment. And that's why it's not really an excellent explanation, because you could say it's like the clouds. It's like the clouds that don't let the sunlight through. So here you don't have a keli. So it's not that the soul is. We don't have proof from this to say the soul is suppressing itself. No, you can say there's no containers. There's no container. In other words, the soul must give off energy, but there's no containers, nowhere to go.
Could you have a nefesh of a cow in a human body?
You could probably. In other words, it's something like having a very overcast day. It's a very, very dark overcast day. So the sun is not shining, not because it's not, because it chose not to shine, because the containers are not there. So the sun is being blocked. That's why he says the first example. That's why he says v'yeser move on. It's better understood, this idea of the proof that the soul has the ability to withhold energy. It's better understood with the first example, with Avram, that it can conceal the faculties. However, in truth, even the concealment of the general life force, like in, God forbid, in reincarnations, it's not only because of the lack of containers, which means the body of the animal is not prepared, is not worthy, it's not mukhan, it's not, you say a keli is ready, is shaped, tailored to receive the spirit, sudas, the shape and spirit of the spirit of a soul, spirit of a human being. This is, by the way, all along parentheses. Because if it was actually forced, if the soul had to, was compelled, and had no choice in its energy and revelation, then it would be revealed automatically, even in a container that is not prepared for it. And he's giving now the example of the sun, like the sunlight. Even when there are clouds that block, that conceal, and the sunlight doesn't reach, in other words, the earth, because you don't see it because of the cloud. Nevertheless, energy is flowing from the sun. Light is flowing from the sun. Like we learned earlier, chapter 55, the previous chapter. It's all a big qualification here in the whole thing. It's a parentheses within a parentheses. And even though there it was explained, that this is because it's the level of Ohr. Since it's Ohr, not Shefa, meaning it's energy, light, and it's not dependent. It's not dependent on containers. So it's true that earlier our discussion there with the clouds was not to demonstrate that the sun must radiate. It was to demonstrate that the sun is Ohr and is not its emanation is not determined and dependent on containers. Nevertheless, another thing we conclude from that, it's also understood from this, that it must radiate. In other words, it doesn't have within it the capacity to just not let light come out of itself. The sun is created to be a luminary. And that's why, if you remember when he used the example with sunlight earlier, there was the example with sunlight. There, sunlight was actually not an example for Ohr Makif. You remember the difference between sun, and he said the difference between sunlight and the light that was created on the first day. I'm going back now to chapter 48. So if you look there on top of the page, he explained that sunlight is actually an example for Ohr Pnimi. Why? Because it has a purpose. Its whole purpose is to radiate this earth. It was created, l'hoyer ala haaretz. Top of page, 48, top of page 84. So there, that part of that, then the sun was an example for the other type of the immanent energy. So he's saying that this element, this is part of the example that the sun, the clouds, in chapter 55 he's using that to explain that it's light and not flow, not shefa. But you could also learn from that it's forced to shine, because if there are clouds and there's a complete blockage, why doesn't the sun just simply stop saying, it's not worth it? I won't extend energy now. It's not being used anyway. But the sun, because the sun is a luminary that must shine all the time. Okay, one second before we continue. Okay, so bottom line, what he's qualifying now is, let's just summarize the parentheses so far. He began first by saying that we have two ways to see how the soul can suppress its energy. One is like Avram just suppresses its faculties, completely suppresses. The second, with the reincarnation, you see in an animal that the soul does not shine there, does not radiate, does not energize it with with the unique soul of the human soul.
It's either from God or from Bechir, which is God-like, which is also like God.
I don't know what you mean by that. The question is, doing what?
Making the soul, suppressing the soul. God.
No, he's proving.
Or Avram Avinu, which is
no. Here it's clearly it's not nothing. We're not talking about God now. We're talking about the soul's capacity. That the soul has the capacity to conceal. So there was one thing is concealing its faculties. The second is concealing its energy. We see this from the Gilgulim. That's what we're discussing now. 1 second. Let me sum it up. Now, when the soul is not radiating inside of an animal that is reincarnated in, so how's the animal alive? It doesn't say here, but you could say two ways. One is that it has an animal soul anyway. And just as an aside, in this prison, it's also a prison for the human soul. Or you could say that maybe the outer layers of the human soul, the aspects of it that, for example, energize even a being, we also have similarities to an animal. The fact that we can move and so on. You could say maybe that has impact. I don't know. But it's not really relevant to the point here. Maybe it is. We'll get to that if he says it. The point, however, is that we see from that is definitely a big part of the soul, its unique element as being nefesh ha'adam, the spirit of a human being, is not manifest. So in the parentheses, he started qualifying by saying, well, you could say it's not manifest because there's a lack of container. So therefore, the first example works better. But now he's saying, no, even the example of the reincarnation also works, because if it was forced to give off, if it was like a sun, meaning that it must radiate, it would radiate even and it must emanate. It would emanate even in a container that's not prepared for it. Like the sun shines even when there's clouds, even when there's a total cloud, let's say a complete block, and there's no benefit of the sun on Earth. At least, I mean, there's always a benefit because the sun makes its way through no matter what happens. But we won't go into that. The sun continues to radiate. The fact that we used earlier the example of the clouds to explain something else, which is to explain that it's light and not dependent on the containers, fine. But it also shows another thing. It shows that the sun is a radiating force at all times. Now he's going back to the soul. So we know from this that the sun does not have the capacity of concealing its energy and stopping the glow, the revelation. Because the revelation from the soul's expression, is also the level of Ohr, light and energy. It also is fundamentally Ohr, as we learned before, because we see it doesn't cause any change in the source. We see this from the other factors. Remember, there's many factors that define Ohr. The other factors, that it doesn't cause any change in the source, and that the revelation and life of it is without any effort and work. Nevertheless, and nevertheless, it still needs a general preparation of the body, as we said earlier. It needs to be the guf adam, the body of a human being.
You're calling the soul like the sunlight or like the sun?
Neither. The soul is the soul. It's just making the distinctions between the different examples. He's working it through here. He's saying, in other words, what he's saying like this. is that the nefesh, so we have two types of Ohr here. One is an Ohr that must shine, and one does not. He's explaining that each example has a quality the other one does not have. The quality of the sun is, that we said, is that it's not confined. So the transcendent energy is not confined, like the sun is not confined. The soul of of a human being is confined in this body, not another. On the other hand, the soul has a flaw in the example. The flaw is that it must radiate. The soul does not have to. And that's what he's discussing. It's still Ohr. It's still Ohr, because we see all the other properties of the soul functions like an Ohr, not like a Shefa. That it doesn't have to, that causes no change and there's no effort involved. Nevertheless, it has to have a body that's prepared to receive. 1 second, we didn't finish. And what we said earlier in the parentheses in the previous chapter, that the soul is an Ohr Pnimi, an internal energy. It's not mamish. Here again, example of mamish. It's not virtually an internal energy like the faculties inside of the organs. Because you cannot compare how the faculties manifest in organs and how the soul manifests in a body. Both, in the way it reveals, and also how it's felt inside the body. In other words, this means that both from the perspective of the soul's energy, or the energy, and both from the perspective of the containers, you can't compare. And that's why it's sufficient in this case, just a general preparation. So I want to make sure I got my parentheses right here. So we have the first one, Sham. Okay. And where should I go from this? We're now in the in a parentheses within a parentheses. Second parentheses within the parentheses. Now we just finished this parentheses. So let me explain this parentheses. What he said right now is the following. Okay. You could say initially, the fact that the clouds block the light from shining, we used before as an example that it's Ohr. What's Ohr? Ohr means that the source is not affected by, nor does it have to apply itself to radiate. The proof is, you see clouds, even though they're clouds, nevertheless it continues to radiate without any difference. It doesn't make a difference to it whether it's being received, it's not being received, and where it's shining and how it's shining and so on. When it comes to a teacher and a student, for example, Shefa doesn't work that way. The student is not a keli, meaning there's, let's say, cloud that, so to speak, block the flow. I'm just going back to the language. I want to get the exact words. The sun does not negate it, does not affect it. It's not negated, it doesn't care one way or the other. It's oblivious. And whether it shines or not does not add or subtract. So when there's clouds, it doesn't have any impact. Not in the sun and not in the revelation from the sun. Whereas, let's say, Hashpas can become a keli. I'm going back to chapter 55. If the student is not a keli, the teacher cannot transmit. Ohr doesn't work that way. Okay. So that's the difference between Ohr and Shefa. So that's what he explains. So now he's saying, now when we talk, let's say, about the Gilgul, why can't you say a Gilgul is similar to that? So he's saying no. Initially, you can say there's no container to receive, and that's why it's like the clouds. But you say, no, that's not the case. Because with the clouds, the sun continues to give light. And the fact that they're clouds means that the sun is not affected by whether the clouds are coming or not. You also know from this that the sun must give light. Because the soul is also an energy. It's also a life force. It's also like the sun in that sense. And since the soul is also an Ohr, as he's going to say at the end, as he said before, he's going to conclude, and it's not shining inside the body of the animal, you have to say that it's not forced to shine. That's the point that he's making here. But there's the distinction. The distinction is, and this goes back maybe to the first point, distinction is that there has to be some general preparation of the body. Meaning there has to be some type of keli here. It's not like a pnimi, the keli of the container of the faculties. But nevertheless, there's some type of container here. Let me just finish the whole parentheses and then I'll explain the whole thing again. And if the soul had to radiate, would have been transmitted from it, the revelation, even in the animal, even in the body of an animal. It would have been in the form of makif, but there would have been some radiating, some energy would be going in. It would be makif, would not be entering it like in the primi, like inside of the body of a human being. And the fact that there's no revelation at all, that proves, that shows, that demonstrates that the revelation is a willful one. It's by will, not by necessity. That's the parentheses. It's a little back and forth. That's why it seems a little complicated. But I think just break it down into pieces. It's digestible. Do you guys get it? To explain, I'll explain it again. I'll explain it in more detail, maybe. The only thing that threw me is because it looks like in this second example, this second point, he's bringing back point one in a way. Alludes to it a bit. Okay. Bottom line is like this. A neshama, a soul, is like, in some ways, as we said, it's primarily an Ohr. But it has in some ways an element of Shefa in it. And that's why this whole little dance here of balancing both sides to it. What's the Shefa part of the soul? Like I said, it's contained in the body. And it cannot give life to another body, which is why Eliyahu Novi couldn't be in two places at once. Fine. When it comes to Ohr now, seemingly the sun is more of an Ohr because the whole body of the sun is only to give light. But it doesn't work good in the example because above, by God, he's not forced to give light. So the soul is going to have more of an aspect of similarity because it's richenis, it's by will. But in the way you lose something when you say it's by will, because in the will, if it's will, then it's not really Ohr. It may not be Shefa. Yes, there's no impact on the source, and the source doesn't have to make any effort to give off light. But in a way, you could say sun is much more quintessential light because all it is light. But in the example, in the whole discussion of this, we're going to learn that there's an aspect that you want to come away with, that it has to be retained, it has to be by will. So that's what the soul adds. But in the process, we go into a whole another dimension of understanding Ohr. So let me finish what I have to say, because I want to get this out. It's very important to get this, break it down. So we have the sunlight, we know that. Now we have the soul's light. Soul's light in some way is Shefa, as I said, in one aspect it's Shefa, which is that it's contained by the body. In the other aspects, that there's no impact on the source, like let's say by a teacher or any real Shefa flow, and that it doesn't have to involve itself and work hard in work and apply itself to giving off to emanate. In that sense, it's Ohr. Now, this will that it has the ability to conceal itself has the virtue that it teaches us that these things are by will. But now we go like this. The concealment of the faculties, good. That's a good example and explanation how it's by will. What about reincarnation inside of an animal body? So you could argue, or initially not just argue, it is true, that primarily because of the containers. There's lack of container. So in that sense, you could say the sun and clouds and a soul of a human being inside of an animal body are very similar. This is an Ohr, this is an Ohr, and now they've encountered a block. This one has now an animal body to contend with, this one has clouds to contend with. So he says no. So even though that aspect of Ohr within both of them is affected by the clouds, both show that even though something is blocking, the sun will continue to radiate. What about the soul? You could say the soul also continues to radiate, but he says it doesn't. So this brings us to a second point. The fact that the sun continues to radiate is not just because it's an Ohr and doesn't care and not affected by the clouds, but because it has to radiate. When it comes to a block that blocks the soul of the human being, two factors impact on its not radiating. One is, yes, there's lack of container. As he said, you need at least a general container. As he said before, in that sense, there's a Shefa element, but it's not complete Shefa because, as we said, it's not like the faculties inside the body. The faculties inside the organs are actually completely manifest there. A soul inside of a body is mugdir. It's confined here. And you need to have a general preparation as opposed to a sun that doesn't have any preparation necessary. But another aspect behind this is, besides the container, is that the sun must radiate and the soul doesn't have to. So if the container is not there, which means it's an animal soul, it's not just that it continues to radiate, it doesn't continue to radiate, it stops radiating. And he proves that if it would radiate, it would be in a form of makiv. There'd be something in the animal soul, and the fact that there's nothing proves that it's also by will. So we have here two types of Ohr, which you can list: Ohr HaShemesh, Ohr HaNefesh, and they function differently. In some things they're very similar. The things they're similar in is that there's no impact on the source, and it doesn't have to make any effort in applying itself. And the difference is that one is confined by a body and is that has some impact on, not impact on it, but it limits it. In that sense, it's an Ohr Primi. It needs an animal. It needs a human body, not an animal body. And that the soul is by desire can choose to withhold its energy, to suppress its energy. That's what he said here in this parenthesis. What's your question now?
The soul is an example of Ohr, and the sunlight is a mushal for Ohr.
What's the difference between mushal and example? I don't really know. They both mean example to me. They're both an example for Ohr, but they have, what he's qualifying in this chapter is each one has a flaw that the other one.
I understand, but
the other one complements.
Sunlight is not really Ohr. It has characteristics like Ohr, but the soul itself.
Where'd you get this from? I don't.
So
why do you say that? Why sunlight is light? It's called Ohr HaShemesh.
It's a real Ohr. It's not a mushal. It's not like an example. It's not like something like it. It's really Ohr. Okay, I didn't know that. What
do you mean? It's physical Ohr. I understand. We're talking about the physical. You mean to say because the soul's energy is not tangible like the sun's energy? Is that what you mean? That he's not discussing that at all here. That's altogether not relevant here. Here he's discussing the way they function. Look, electricity works for you. Electricity is also not visible. It has a source of electricity, and there's electricity flow of electricity. You just saying sunlight. You're talking about sunlight because you see the sunlight and you don't see the soul's light.
More than that.
What would be more than that?
I just thought.
Remember, the sun is also transmitting all kinds of rays when it comes to things that you don't see.
We're limited, so we get a physical muscle, which is not really. You're saying that you're defining it as real or. Okay, fine.
I don't know what you mean by real R. The real R word is what means real R? Only Ohr and Shefa, divine light is divine light.
Right.
We have examples of
divine light.
But we're talking about examples. We're talking about examples to understand the transcendent energy of God.
Right. And the soul is something of that.
And so the first example was sunlight.
Sunlight is
and the second example is the soul. This distinction you're making, the Rebbe Rashbi doesn't make. Let me just make that clear. He doesn't make this distinction. His distinctions is how they work. Because the bottom line is everything originates from God's light. Okay, the question is the soul's energy and the sun's energy all originate from God's energy. But they function differently, and they're different examples.
Okay, so sunlight is real or?
I don't know what you mean by real R. I don't know with the word. Who defines what real R is? Have you ever met real R? I mean, what? I mean, the only R we know is the R that we relate to. What does real R mean?
I am, but there is something that maybe I never met.
Why would you say the soul's energy is more real R than the sun? They're both created. They're both not divine. The divine energy before the tzimtzum.
The soul isn't.
No, the soul is a soul that comes inside a body. They're rooted. It's rooted. Everything's rooted. But that's divine energy. God's energy and the soul's energy. The soul that gives energy inside of a body is coming from God. But so is the soul. So is the sunlight. So is the light that the sun gives us is also coming from God. Did you understand all these distinctions I made? Okay. It's just that in this parentheses it went back and forth, so I wanted to just work it out here. So I think there's two aspects to the body, with the impact of the body of the animal on the soul, as opposed to the clouds are meaningless to the sun. The body of a human being is a keli, as he said, chonaklolis. It's not a specific preparation, let's say, by the faculties and each aver, and the faculties and each organ. There, that's real Ohr Pnimi. The soul has an element of Ohr Pnimi in it.
So it comes out quite interesting. It shows that even though it's an Ohr Pnimi, it's still able to irradiate when it's not in a proper container.
Yeah. So in the parentheses, within the parentheses, he's talking more about how the container within the parentheses, talking more about the element of whether it's because the air is in oblivious to the containers, or not. And outside, and the first parenthesis is talking about that it comes from will. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So even with the container, you can speak the two aspects. The one aspect, it's similar to the sun, the soul, that it's an oyer and doesn't need effort and doesn't impact on it. That's correct. But on the other side, it's not similar to the sun because achana kol there is needed there. And then there's the other aspect that is by will and not by automatic by first. So now back to outside the parenthesis. Hareshagili hudetzenis. So the revelation, therefore, is by will. Going back to before the whole parentheses. Okay, now what? So there he said, you see now that the soul is a sense. And even though it comes by will, so you could say, 1 second, if it comes by will, we're back to Shefa. Because a teacher also willingly chooses to now transmit to a student, and when he does so, he's making the commitment to get involved and work at it. Here, with the soul, you have like an opposite thing. You'd think the sun is automatic. You know why it's automatic? And not by desire. I'm sorry, the sun it comes naturally from the sun, it doesn't take any effort. Because the sun is a radiator. But here you're saying it's coming from a desire. Nevertheless, the energy and light of the soul comes automatically. So we have here something that has both qualities. It's desire, and it does not take any effort, which of course is going to explain a key element in the Nimshal in Ohr and Shefa, which is going to go to now. The example of all this is Yuvan Lamaila will understand above in the infinite, in the light.
So we're going to use Shefa to fight the Ohr.
Just click on all the way to the right. It says do not send or something. Or what does it say? What are the options? What are the options there?
It says send every word, don't send.
Don't send. Oh, no. This is going to be a problem.
I think it's once it closes in yours.
It will when you close this, the whole thing will stop?
I don't know.
Right, don't send.
Or just ignore it. Just ignore it. Let's see what happens.
Okay, I'm not, okay. No, because I'm concerned. Right, don't send. Okay. So all this is going to come explain how it is Ohr and Shefa. Ohr and Shefa, the light, as we spoke earlier, without end. The infinite light. Not that the light itself is infinite. This infinite light is a revelation of the essence that's similar to the essence. Like Ohr. Because now in general, these two levels of light and flow, Lamaila, because in general, these two dimensions, these two forms of transmission that we spoke about above, one is the energy that manifests in containers and in the worlds, and the second is the area that beyond, that transcends and is beyond hislapshus, beyond manifesting within, the transcendent energy. So one is the immanent energy and one is the transcendent. Yeah. The energy that manifests in containers is the one that comes like a shefa. And in its root and its source is energy to radiate the world, not the energy that it just reveals the essence. If you recall earlier, he discussed these two at length. Obviously, going back to chapters, he began discussing the difference between these two, all the way, where was it? This began in chapter 46. If you remember, he started speaking about the difference between the two. 46, and then of course in 48. And continued on the example of desire and faculties, all came to explain all this. So he's bringing it all back now to that. The two types of energy, immanent and transcendent. So remember, the first 47 chapters was about immanent energy. Then he moved over in chapter 46, started talking about the transcendent and comparing the two, using the example of desire and faculties. One is just an expression of the source. The other has a purpose and faculty to radiate within existence. And now he's going back and tying it all together. So that which manifests in containers is Shefa. And in its root is the energy that radiates the worlds, and that's not just to reveal and express the essence. Which means that it should be a Metzias Seir. It's a form of Shefa, but it's Ohr. We're also talking about Ohr. In Ohr itself, these two different aspects. That there should be a Metzias Seir, there should be an existence, a substantial transmission here. And this manifests within containers. This is, by the way, the level of the 10 hidden spheres in its root, which becomes the Kav, which later manifests within the containers of Atzilus. And when it manifests within the containers, it becomes, as we learned earlier, a Muhus Metzias David. It becomes something of substance and personality. And the transmission is in an organized and hierarchical fashion, orderly, organized, higher, lower, and distinguished and diverse and divided by levels of higher and lower. In intensity and in its and miut and its diminishment. In more and less, but ribui is more and miut is less. So what I called it before, miut, ribui is intensity, and miut is diminished or lessened. And they are distinguished fundamentally in their essential levels. All this, by the way, is the words that he used all the way back then. If you remember when he explained the gradations of the spatial hierarchy of the spheres and of the worlds, he used all this. So every line here is every word here is precise. That it manifests in the containers and becomes substance. Okay, so the examples are also very relevant because every detail of the example is now going to play itself out. Becomes a mahus metzias of substance, and the transmission is in a progression, and divided by higher and lower, both in ribui and mit. If you remember the ribui mit, how strong and powerful the energy is, meaning and how concealed it is, but also if you remember, it wasn't just how diminished energy, but fundamentally Chachma was higher than Bina, and that's why it had more energy in it. And so-called, what you say, kiruv v'dichuk, closer to the source, or more distance to the source, means how much bittul it has and how much energy it has. I'm saying its fundamental level of how it relates to the divine, that determines the measure of energy it gets from the kav and where it's placed in the progression of things. All this is a summary of those many chapters back then. Why? Because this general energy is only for one purpose: to radiate the worlds. And it comes, and that means, and it's not just to radiate the worlds from above, but it comes in a manifest, internalized, integrated way. As we said before, if it weren't for the worlds, we wouldn't have 10 spheres. You wouldn't need this energy. It wouldn't be shaykhs, as he put it earlier. Back in chapter 47, I believe. Yeah. Now we go to the transcendent energy. However, the energy that's a level of called infinite energy, not just the energy of the infinite. Because as we said, 2 reasons you can't call it energy of the infinite, because you can't call God without end or without infinite. You'd have to call him without beginning. And secondly, without end implies some expression, some extension, some hispashtus, some expansion. So it's about the Ohr, which is Bechinas Ein Sof, Hu Shaba Mina Atzmus Leibishvil Hayres Elemus. It comes from the essence, not in order to radiate the worlds, to illuminate in the worlds. It's only a Gilead Etzem. Rather, it's just a revelation of the essence. Shehu b'Bechinas Ayin Beis. So now all the things they just said don't apply here. He's going to say now. There he said it's a mahus, mitzias. Now he says it's ayin be'etzem. It's fundamentally substanceless, fundamentally shapeless, formless. It's not at all a mahus mitzias davar klal. Shefa, something is being transmitted, one way or another. Here, there's nothing, doesn't have any personality, and it doesn't have any substance.
So how do you say that? You're still calling it Gilead.
Correct.
Sounds like Gili, but has all these characteristics of not. Somehow you're saying
it doesn't have characteristics. It's just that's all it is. It's like the color of an object, as he said before. Compare that to the other one, and that's where it's compared. It's in a state of Ein Sof, without end, endless, infinite. Completely shapeless. And doesn't come in any form of manifestation of islapshus, dressing up in a garment. Just like the essence, atzmus is not together. It's not even in the league. It's not even in the potential state of islapshus together. How would you define ein begeder? It's not even in that category. Of not even the category of islapshus of manifesting. There's something. Same thing as the revelation of the essence doesn't come in any form of manifestation in something. And even though it's only a revelation of the essence and not the essence itself, because it doesn't have anything from the etzem, as we said, sunlight, the light of the sun does not have anything from the sun in it. All it is a reflection of the sun. All it is a energy from the sun. So even though it's not the essence, but it's like similar to the essence. Just like the essence is infinite and shapeless, the same thing, the energy is endless, infinite, and formless, and a state of formlessness. The be'emes mitzad hapshita shebe'er ein shayach by shum shem rak ein sof. Because in truth, because of the shapelessness of the energy, you can't give it any name but to say it's ein sof, to say that it's infinite. He's adding another thing now. He's explaining how the energy, the name Ohr and Shefa is the only name you can give to the Ohr, is saying it's Ein Sof. Omnom kishenichna isa b'shem. When you give it that name, when we give it that name, meaning defining how it comes out when it's revealed, as we shall explain, we cannot also call it just the name desire. Because Ratzon comes gili min ha'etzem. Because Ratzon comes as a revelation from the essence, like we discussed earlier, chapter 49. I don't understand this distinction. My mistake. I didn't read it right. I read it wrong. It's so fine. Omnam kishnachana yiseh b'shem. When you give it a name, meaning when it comes out in a revealed state, ef shel rak b'shem ratzon. The only way we can describe it is only with the name desire. Not. I read it wrong. I said you cannot call it the name desire. I'll tell you why. Here, see, I was applying my own knowledge from elsewhere, because elsewhere is going to explain that the Alter Rebbe, that the Rameh calls Ein Sof, Ohr Ein Sof, Ratzon. And the Alter Rebbe says it's not Ratzon because Ratzon is already a level. So I was thinking that's what he's saying here. He's not what he's saying here. So I was reading, I was saying you can't call it the name Ratzon. The truth is that Rak tells you could call it. You can't call it anything else but desire. Why? Because the Ratzon, desire, comes as a revelation from the essence. As we explained earlier, chapter 49. So basically, right now, this Ohr is called Ratzon. I will qualify and tell you that clearly in Chassidus, the Alter Rebbe's Chiddush is that Ohr is higher than Ratzon. But that's going to be probably qualified later. We're not discussing that right now. Ohr is higher than Ratzon. But right now, for practical purposes, desire and faculties is like Ohr and Shefa, and they're connected in the source to the infinite light, which is only to reveal essence, and the immanent light as the transcendent light becomes the root of Seviv Klalman, and the immanent and light, which is the 10 hidden spheres, how God envisioned existence, is the energy that to radiate the world and has a purpose and function, which is more like Shefa. Elsewhere, what I said is going to be explained. I don't think we learned that earlier. No, I don't think so.
Says the Ohr and Shefa is higher than Ratzon.
Or, because we have Ohr, we're going to learn Ohr is all the way goes into the essence itself. Ratzon is already some type of manifestation. Relatively speaking, Ratzon compared to faculties is Ohr. For practical purposes right now, it's all in the form of Ohr, which is basically Ratzon. The only purpose of desire is to reveal and express the soul. It doesn't have anything else. You have to remember that
Atik is the beginning of Ohr.
Which Atik?
Not Arik. But talking about Ratzon, we're talking about Arik. So Atik is probably the beginning of Ohr.
Ohr is even higher than Atik, but yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It depends which level of Ohr. I mean, Atik is.
Ohr and Shefa.
Yeah, but there's a lot of levels in Ohr and Shefa. They're going to learn. There's Ohr and Shefa as it's encompassed in the essence. There's Ohr and Shefa as it comes out of the essence. We learned that already. Then there's Ohr and Shefa that has within it spheres, but infinite spheres. Then there's Ohr and Shefa that defines 10 spheres. Yeah, we spoke some of the levels before. He hasn't elaborated. Look, as we discussed, there's levels and levels and levels. Let's finish the Maimer already, right? That's what I'm going to do. Yeah, I'm going to do it very quickly. It's a page and a half, but it's
been a month of this, 10 years of this.
Well, we're moving very quickly here, chapter a day. We're moving. This is for chapter 56 here. 56. Okay, Valpi Hanal, the conclusion of the discourse. Valpi Hanal, according to the above view of Mashakasu Shoftim Titan Lecha, will understand what it says. Judges and law enforcers you shall place. Titan Lecha, you shall place by all your gates. You shall appoint for yourself at all the gates. The Pardes writes that the 10 spheres of Atzilus are called Mishpat from the perspective of Bina. They're called judgment or justice from the perspective of Bina. So that's Shefet, Mishpat. What does that mean? By Inyan, justice, the whole idea of justice is that he judges, Shefet, you measure and judge, is it this way or is it that way? Which means you judge. Is this one right? Is this one correct? Or you're judging a situation and determining which is the right way to correct way. Or Baruchnius, in the spiritual state, Inyan HaMishpat, what is the Inyan of Mishpat, of justice? It's the measurement. It's the what did I say? Shada.
Evaluation.
The valuation. Yeah, that's good. The evaluation in the energy, in how it should be transmitted into the recipients. Should it go in this fashion or in that form? And also in the judging and measuring, in the preparation of the recipient, if he's worthy for the hashpah, for the transmission, and the way he's worthy, in the way that he is worthy. So all this is possible only in the immanent energy that manifests an energy inside of a container. Therefore, there's a possibility of all these options. And what the Pardes says, okay, so we understand now the essence spheres are all around. Mishpat is all justice. And measuring justice is all about the 10 spheres. What the Pardes says, it comes from the side of Bina. What does that mean? This is what we discussed earlier. Remember that the primary beginning of the cosmic order, of the structure of existence, is from Bina. Chachma, we learned, is already l'mayla mishtalshus, because Chachma has a taste, is a me'ain of that which is beyond. If you recall, we spoke this at length, that even though Chachma is also lower than Ratzon, But the example of Chochmah Bina, because within existence we also have a taste of something that's beyond existence. Remember the hologram. It's critical, so there's no contradictions here. However, now he's going back to the beginning. If you remember the beginning of the discourse, he brought the Medrash. The Medrash brought that God, an example, just like a father, a king, had many children. And he loved the youngest one more than all, so what did he do? And he had a paradise, an orchard, which he loved more than everything, so he took the thing he loved most and gave it to the one I love most. That's what he said. So the Medrash says, God said the same thing. I love the Jewish people more than all the nations, and therefore, what I've created, which is justice, I give to the one I love most. So the question he asked was, what's the connection between the youngest and so on? However, what it says now in Medrash Shabbat of Oyev Esakot Yeshem Mekulam, that he loves the youngest one more than them all. Here the intention in this is to transmit the essence of the divine light. So Bishpat in general is talking about the energy, the immanent energy. But this message, he says, the one I love most, the youngest one, here the intention is to transmit the higher energy, the transcendent energy. That's Ein Sof and Bli Gvul. Without end and infinite. Without limit. Because in order to transmit the essence of the divine light, the transcendent light, this is specifically through not having containers. The lack of container, lack of meaning emptying yourself, suspending yourself. That's the container for Atzmus Ein Sof. So remember, we spoke about faculties need containers. Soul needs a container, a body. Transcendent energy, which is the divine highest energy, is the exact opposite. If you're there, it disturbs the flow. The transmission is when you're not there. And that's the bittul that he's going to say is cotton. That's the beauty. That's a cotton. That's the child. Yeah, the littlest one. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's the bittul, the suspension of self that's higher than logic. That's supra-logical. Supra-rational, actually, is the best word. That's the true inyan of bittul. A bittul that comes, a suspension of self that comes based on rational reasons, is not true suspension of self. Because your intelligence compelled you so. Therefore, you're still a mitzias when you're batel, because it came as a result of your mitzias. Because you relate to the virtues of bittul, your mitzias dictated it's worthwhile. So your mitzias, even when you're bittul. There's a story with Yisrael Nevler. Huh? No. Yisrael Nevler, the Rebbe Rashab told him that he should stay up Thursday night. He was a Chassidus in Yeshiva. He told him to stay up Thursday night to learn Chassidus and so on. Once in a while, he got tired. So what he'd do is he'd go lie down Thursday day, so he could be up Thursday night. The Friedrich Rebbe took meticulous attendance. And he would go over, he would review it with the Rebbe Rashab, and they see Yisrael Nevler. He's not coming every Thursday. Once in a while you see he's not there in Yeshiva. So the Rebbe Rashab called him in and said, what is this? So he said, the Rebbe said to stay up Thursday night. So sometimes they have to prepare to stay up. I have to prepare for it. Meaning, take a nap. So the Rebbe Rashab said to him, do you think, Yisrael, from sleeping you can come to not sleeping? That sleep can be a preparation for not sleep. Basically, there's two types of bittul. There's a bittul. Okay, it's a bittul mitzvah. The Rebbe Rashab said, so I know I have to be up, so I'll go to sleep in order to not sleep. So then there's a real bittul. Like one guy once told me, he said to me, even bittul has to have some geschmack. But that means that some taste. Anyway, the point here is that a bittul from Tam Vadas, rational, is not complete, because it's an interesting expression. And therefore, because it's coming from rational reason, he's a mitzias, he's in a state of mitzias, even when he's bottled. He's still a mitzias. Additionally, when it comes from rational reasons, the bittul is in order, has a purpose. In order for you to be a container for the revelation of the transmission, the revelation of the energy. That also seichel compels you and concludes that you should be a container. So it's also right. And also, additionally, it also has within a limit. It's going to be commensurate to the amount that how much your rational compels you to be, that brings you, that compels and brings you to this bittul. So your bittul is direct proportion to what your rational tells you. And according to the measure of how he wants to be a container, according to that, it will be his bittul. If I want to be more container, I'll be more bottle. If I want to be less, I'll be a little less bottle. Bottom line is you're in control. It's interesting how he spells it out, huh? You can bring about this when you say somebody, okay, he says, you know what, I'm going to be bittul for an hour to you, and then I'm going to stop. Or, I'm giving you 40% of my bittul. The mishum kol zeh, because of all this, ain't a bittul amiti. Because of all this, it's not a true bittul. V'amitis habittul, true bittul, hu ba'bittul da'anochas hatzmusei, is a bittul of a suspension of self, completely putting yourself aside. She'eino al pitam v'das, that's not based on rationale. Ve'eino b'chinas hagbola, and it's not confined and limited. V'uyin bittul hakotten, and that's the bittul of the cotton, of the young one, of the child. L'gaba agodl, shemizbatel mikolatz musei. The bittul of a young person compared to a mature is that his whole essence is, it's not relative bittul. It's not a little less more. A little child, look at a little child, how they completely are receptive. It's not like, and it's not based on logic. In Yiddish, he says, efar, he loses himself in face of the adult. The mashpia or mekabel, bottle and mashpia. When you talk about mashpia and mekabel, teacher, student, or transmitter and recipient, the mekabel, bottle and mashpia, the recipient is bottle, is subjugated to the transmitter. And through this he becomes a container to receive. Achwa pitam v'das. But there, mashpia mekabel, there it's a pitam v'das. It's a logical, it's a rational relationship. Daily is keli. Why is he subjugated to his teacher? Because he wants to be a container. And he won't receive if he's not. We're not even talking about a student that's not bottle. We're talking here there is. By contrast, the subjugation, the bittul, the lack of self of a young person compared to an adult is not based on tam v'das. It's not based on rationale. The bittul is with his entire essence. Actually, this you see. You literally see this. You don't even need an explanation. Young children. I'm talking about a child who already, a young child. 1-2-year-old. That's why parents can be so powerful in the eyes of a child, both, God forbid, for negative and obviously for positive. The child is completely submissive. There's no battle going on. A 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old. No, that's another thing. But when it comes to they may. But when they're bottle, it's not with. At what age do we lose bittul? It's interesting. 3? No.
18 months old. That's what
I'm not talking about like that. I'm talking about bittul, in a more. It's not before bar mitzvah. It doesn't mean you don't have any. But what do you really? Yeah, you lie. You may cheat. But
you're still bittul.
No, because you have control. You can order. A child like that is still going to listen. They may not listen in private, but you still dominate over them. Okay, well, fine. And this is the meaning. This is what it says in Medrash Shabbat, that he loved the youngest one. He loved b'chinas bittul hanal. That's what it. It's a beautiful explanation of this Medrash. That means the bittul that we're talking about. Now he's going a little deeper, and this is that the gadol eises atzmei l'katan. This love for the cotton is that the gadol, meaning the king here, is making his eises. He's turning his eises atzmei. He's turning himself into a cotton. The cotton ein le das. A child has no das, has no yet mature intelligence. And a godel bedas, meaning a mature person, adult in knowledge, in his mind and in his emotions, he makes himself like a small person. My mistake. I interpret that on the king. It's not on the king. He's talking now in Aveda. What does it mean, Aveda? That the godel should become like a cotton. In other words, that you should turn yourself into that. He puts himself aside, fundamentally laying yourself aside. This is the bittul that's above tam v'das, that a regular mashpia makabel do not have, a regular teacher and student. This is Kabbalah Sel Malchus Shemayim, the acceptance of the yoke of heaven on Rosh Hashanah. Dehine, because in general, the inyan of Kabbalah Sel Malchus Shemayim, in general, accepting the yoke of heaven, in general, Hu She'ein Al Pidam V'das. It's in general not according to rational. The Eyev Elanev, the Bittul Ha'eved Ladene. As it's known, the difference between a beloved, oyev, elanev, a lover, to his beloved, comparing that different from the bittul, from the subjugation of a lover to his beloved, and the subjugation of a servant to his master. The ba'ev v'nehav, in a lover and a beloved, because he knows and appreciates his ilui, that person's quality, and because he receives from him. And therefore his subjugation, his submission is commensurate to his awareness and his comprehension and understanding, right? And according to this, measured to this, is the way he becomes a container for his beloved. The bittul, the subjugation of a servant, is not because of the quality of the master. And it's not in order to receive anything. Remember, the transcendent energy has no purpose. All it is revealing the essence. That's all that matters. There's no function. Even the function of faculties and containers, the function of a teacher teaching a student, is also not there. Only because he's a servant. That's all I am. I'm a servant. I'm here. I'm completely subjugated. This is in general, and this is similarly is also the general accepting the yoke of heaven. And specifically on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the Kabbalah accepting the yoke of heaven is in general placing all of yourself, your whole essence aside for godliness. He places, in Yiddish he adds, he places them entirely away and aside for godliness, for elikus. Because why is this on Rosh Hashanah? Because Rosh Hashanah is the time when we draw down, we draw down and transmit the desire for kingship, for leadership, and the desire, God's desire for creating and sustaining the worlds. This is the level of Kesed Malchus. The desire within Malchus, that we draw down, that we transmit on Rosh Hashanah. This is the transmission of the essence of the divine, the transcendent energy. The container for this is, as he said, no container. Specifically, the way you this is bitl hanal, the total laying, putting yourself aside. This is what the Razal say on the pasuk that about Eretz Yisrael. So it says God watches over this land from beginning of the year to the end of the year. See, so it says Reishis Chasuk. We've already learned this before. It says Reishis Chasuk, but it says Mereishis Hashanah. The beginning of the year should be with an aleph. It says Reishis without an aleph. Chasuk Siv. Reishis is written missing that letter. The Chol why? The Chol Shana Shirasha B'Tchilasa Haru Misasheres. Every year that's Rasha B'Tchilasa, that's like poor, impoverished. In the beginning, will turn into a very wealthy year. That's what the Gemara says. The Razal say. Upirish Rashi explains. She Yisrael Eishin Atzman Kiroshin Ukedalim. When Israel they turn themselves Russian into being complete emptiness, complete paupers, Vidalim and poor and impoverished ones. Kiroshin Ukedalim, like empty ones. and impoverished ones, but Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, umavakshim tachnunim, and they request, and all their tachnunim, they're beseeching to God, ki'ilu einam ruim chas v'shalom. In other words, as if they are not worthy, God forbid, umavakshim rak rachmin. All we're asking is your mercy. V'chein mavakshim slicha mechila, and they also request forgiveness and mechila, slicha mechila, two forms of forgiveness. Slicha, to forgive, and mechila, to overlook. And even total tzaddikim, complete tzaddikim, who are not capable of any sin, God forbid, also ask forgiveness and say viduyim, say the confession, the vidui, al chet. They make themselves as if they're sinners and transgressors. And they're an awakening of a tshuva, of a return with literally an actual broken heart. And they accept upon themselves the yoke of heaven completely. Complete acceptance of the yoke of heaven. With completely suspending their entire essence. And also in this, there's also mishpat. Okay, so he said now, mishpat, he said before, is the 10 spheres, and the relationship with the 10 spheres already with the structure of existence. But the Medrash adds that now we have to introduce the cotton. We have to introduce the mishpat as being given to the cotton. So now he's explaining that second half. Because the cotton is the bittul that introduces the infinite divine light, which is the transcendent light. So now he says, and here too we need mishpat. Even in this higher bittul, which is the transcendent energy, and he said before mishpat is the immanent energy, we also need immanence. And that is to judge yourself in the things that are permitted. Because in this time of the year, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, there has to be specific, additional, increasing care has to be taken, as it's known, about what you permit yourself to do, even the things that are permitted. V'gam in ha'nocha b'chlal, and also mishpat, in order the general placing yourself aside. Hu'inyin ha'mishpat, the general placing yourself aside is also a matter of certain justice, a certain measurement. Sheshefet machnias etzasme, because he judges and he's sublimates himself. Machnia is achno. We talked about achno, subjugates. No, machnia is when you submits himself, or submission. Machnia satzme. Yeah, like we talked about. Ein edin l'spal el b'kovid reish, when a person prays only with heavy mind, meaning he hachno. It's a submission. It's a surrender. So yes, submissive. But he also mishpat is both in measuring what you're permitted to do in this time, and also in general judging and submitting yourself, surrendering. Now, what does it mean that the Medrash says mishpat, that he loves the judgment? He says the expression is he loves his youngest child, and he's going to give what he loves to the one that he loves. So he loves the total bittul, and he's giving him mishpat. So mishpat is needed even in this total bittul. Yeshleim, we can say this means shezel mashi yesh ma'ila b'pnimi ala makif. Means that he loves, that there's a ma'ila, there's a virtue of pnimi over makif, over internal immanence over transcendence. And that is, as we just discussed earlier in the beginning of this section, that mishpat is in the 10 spheres. As it's known, as it's known, the superiority, the supremacy, the virtue of Yesher over Igulim. This is Kabbalistic language. Save of Mamala, transcendent, immanent, Makif Pnimi, surrounding internal. In Kabbalah, it's called Yesher, is the line, the straight line, and Igulim are the circles. So Yesher is internalist energy, like the Kav. Igulim is the eagle, like the eagle Agadol, the circle. So it's known, the Maila of Yesher over Igulim. V'inyan, okay. So now basically we really need, as he's saying in the end of every discourse, you need the quality of both, bringing Pnimi and Makif together. So Mishpat on its own is Pnimi, is immanent. Oyev is a cotton, is transcendence that comes through total bittul. There too you need mishpat, and the love of mishpat is because the quality that brings the internalization. In other words, you don't just want the bittul of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, you want it also to be internalized. You're sighing? Why, which level have you not reached? Okay. The Inyan shani noisen ma shani oyev lezeh shani oyev, and the Inyan, what it says in the Medrash, that I give what I love to the one that I love. Hu shayidei amshach zeiratzmi nimshach memela pnimi. Because I love, meaning through the transmission of the essential energy, the transcendent energy, automatically you also get the internal energy. So what is God saying? I give mishpat, my immanent energy, to the one that I love, to the cotton, to the bittul of the transcendent energy. V'gam yesh leim merakavana. We could also say the meaning in it is, the intention in this is, that he gives that which he loves to the one he loves. And that is what he gives to Israel, specifically the power of bittul that's higher than the super rational bittul. In other words, what he's saying, that he gives what he loves to the one that he loves, is not referring that he gives the immanent energy to the transcendent energy. It's that he's saying that he gives to the one that he loves, he giving them the transcendent power, the bittul of bit power. The last amount
of bittul you get from upstairs.
V'zeu kanal. 1 second. That's what we learned earlier. As we said earlier, sha'anocha gufu inyan hamishpat. That placing yourself aside, that itself is mishpat. And in truth, even this bittul that's super rational is also a form of pnimi, because it's placing yourself completely aside. It's not just some incidental makavdika thing. You are completely being mavatli yourself. Bottom line is, there's two interpretations. So we said before that you need mishpat also when you place a bittul. And that's what God is giving you, that mishpat. So in other words, there's two things there. Mishpat could mean the justice, the measurement that's necessary in the bittul that's higher than super rational, or it could mean the mishpat that comes as a result of being that bittul. You also get the quality of internalization. So really, and interdependent, because the fact is that type of total bittul is also internalization. Yeah, because they're rooted in the essence of the divine light.
Is it related to what the parties is itself? The fruit.
He didn't say yet. We'll see. Because that bittul is rooted in Atzmus Ein Sof, and he gives that to his ones that he loves. And every Jew, every one of Israel has this level, and it's easy for him to come to it. More than the work, the effort that is rational. That not everyone is capable of that. Only one who's possible, capable of comprehension and meditation and contemplation. And it needs a lot of work, like we said before with the work. Remember, Shefa requires effort. It needs a lot of work and Yigiyah and exertion. Rabba, extensive work and exertion. Now you're seeing all the levels you're seeing here. About Shefa, about the Ohr and Shefa, the internal light. And it has within it many different levels. Whether the effort, whether the work, the Aveda, the service will be like this or like that. But the bittul, the super rational bittul, this everyone has, and it's easy to come to it. And this is the meaning of judges and law enforcers. You shall appoint to yourself in all your gates. So Peter's b'shach al Torah, it says the sifsikein on the Torah, shein chushi hanefesh. These are the senses of the soul. Ukadisa b'sefer Yitzira, like it says in the book of Formation, Zayin sha'arim b'nefesh. The soul has 7 gates. Beis enayim, 2 eyes. Beis eznayim, 2 ears. Beis nikvei achetim, 2 nostrils. V'apeh, and the mouth. 7. Shetzorech li zamishbet v'hagdora b'chol chushei nefesh. That means sheftim v'sheftim. You shall place judges and law enforcers at all your gates, at all your 7 gates. This means that you need to measure and judge and what you said, what you evaluate the Agdara, the category of the state of being, the state of being of all your 7 senses. Lias eitzim einav miraris bara. That you should close your eyes strongly from seeing evil. Ve'eitim oiznei, and shut your ears mishmeya, from hearing something bad. Ubeilam piv, and lock your mouth from speaking bad. So in other words, that's the mishpat, to make sure your senses do not. Yeah. And all this comes because of the bittul where you place yourself completely aside. The higher bittul. It says elsewhere. He says chachma here. And this is the bittul that comes from the chachma, not bina. And the power of desire within the soul. So it's the transcendent level. And when you have this type of bittul where you completely set yourself aside, then automatically you have the mishpat, which is the hagdara b'chol evri haguf, that you're going to measure and define and confine. Hagdara is categorization of all the organs of the body. And this is the meaning where he says, and they shall judge the nation a righteous justice. This is referring now to the judgment of all the organs of the body. In other words, in addition that you have to place mishpat and shoftim on your gates, it's also you have to judge and categorize all the organs of your body. And through all of this we draw down and we transmit the infinite, the essence of the infinite light. This is what it says in Medrash, that in the merit of mishpat of justice, I will rest my holiness among you, between you, among you. You do it. The kedusha because it's known the kedusha. This means a part godliness. The holiness refers to the essence of the divine. It's holy and removed and apart from all of the structure of existence, from the immanent. And it's drawn and transmitted specifically through this justice. And the second statement, and the merit of this justice, I will redeem all of you in a complete redemption. Redemption also comes from the essence of the divine light, the transcendent energy. If I will redeem you, Anochi will redeem you. Because Geula, redemption means going out of your transcending and leaving your confined state. That's specifically from the essence of the divine light. And all this we transmit through mishpat, through justice. This is the meaning. Judges and the law enforcers, you shall appoint for yourself the level of mishpat, the bittul, that you will judge and sublimate yourself completely and place your entire essence aside. This is Kenai Yisrael. Israel is like a child, because they diminish themselves in a form of a complete suspension of self and placing themselves aside. Because through this they draw down and they transmit the essence of the divine light. And this is the meaning, that the merit of the justice, I will rest my holiness among you, and I will redeem you in a complete geula. Kitzur, summary. The soul is confined in the body. And the soul is, and the sun is not confined. But the sun is mukhrich, it's forced. It must radiate. But in the soul, the revelation is willing, is by will. Nevertheless, it's a state of Ohr, not Shefa. What's the example of it above? The energy to radiate the worlds is immanent energy. That's like the flow of Shefa. And the infinite, transcendent energy is only revelation of the source, and it's similar to the source. The only thing you can call it, describe it as, is desire. Which reveals the essence. And according to the above, we understand the verse of judges and law enforcers, you shall appoint for yourself. So we finished Discourse 14.